Trump has just done the unthinkable, terminating all trade negotiations with Canada over a television advertisement. Not just any ad, but one featuring the voice of Ronald Reagan himself, speaking against the very tariffs Trump champions. This isn't just another diplomatic spat. This is a complete breakdown of one of America's most crucial economic relationships, triggered by what Trump calls fraudulent use of a beloved Republican president's words against the very tariffs he champions.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced tonight he is terminating trade talks with Canada, blaming an anti-tariff ad by Ontario for the reason. Trump posted this message on social media saying, "The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement, which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75,000. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention."
The advertisement controversy has sent shockwaves through both capitals, with Trump taking to his Truth Social platform to announce the dramatic decision. His message was characteristically explosive, claiming Canada had fraudulently used a $75,000 advertisement to interfere with U.S. court decisions. In his view, this egregious behavior warranted the complete termination of all trade negotiations. But here's where the story gets really interesting. While Trump was fuming about this advertising campaign, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was quietly executing a strategy that could fundamentally reshape North American trade forever. He announced Canada's intention to double its non-U.S. exports over the next decade, essentially declaring economic independence from America's unpredictable trade policies. To understand why this matters so much, we need to grasp the sheer scale of the Canada-U.S. economic relationship. More than 3/4 of Canadian exports go to the United States. Nearly 3.6 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods and services cross the border daily. Canada is the top export destination for 36 U.S. states. We're talking about one of the most integrated economic relationships in the world, built up over decades of cooperation. But Trump's tariff-heavy approach has changed everything. His administration has imposed steep tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and automobiles, prompting Canada to respond with retaliatory measures. The relationship that was once characterized by mutual benefit has become increasingly adversarial, with Trump even suggesting Canada could become America's 51st state. The advertisement that triggered Trump's latest outburst was created by the government of Ontario, Canada's largest province. It features audio from a 1987 radio address by Ronald Reagan, where the former president warned about the dangers of protectionist trade policies. The ad strategically targeted Republican voters in key U.S. areas, designed to turn Trump's own base against his tariff agenda. In Reagan's own words from the ad, when someone says, "Let's impose tariffs on foreign imports," it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes, for a short while, it works, but only for a short time. Over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. The irony is unmistakable. Here was Reagan, a Republican icon, making the exact opposite case from Trump's tariff-heavy trade agenda. The ad was part of a $75 million campaign by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, designed to run on major American networks including Fox News, Fox Sports, NBC, CBS, and ABC. Ford wasn't subtle about his intentions, posting on social media, "Using every tool we have, we'll never stop making the case against American tariffs on Canada."
Infuriated the president. This is an ad that the government of Ontario put out. It features Ronald Reagan talking about the potential negative impact of tariffs, and what the government of Ontario, which is one of the hearts of Canadian industry, was intending to do is to target Republican areas in the U.S. to try to kind of sway Republican voters, the key constituency for Donald Trump, to convince them that tariffs may not be the greatest thing in the world. This is obviously something that really hurt.
The way to prosperity is by working together. The Ontario government's bold advertising strategy clearly struck a nerve in the White House. The use of Reagan's voice warning against tariffs represented a direct challenge to Trump's economic philosophy, delivered through the words of a conservative hero. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation did indeed object to the ad, saying Ontario had not received permission to use and edit Reagan's remarks. They claimed the ad misrepresented Reagan's full position, though the excerpts used were authentic and consistent with Reagan's broader criticism of protectionist policies. The foundation said it was reviewing legal options. The damage to diplomatic relations was already done.
Adrian, Donald Trump declaring on social media that he's officially called off trade talks with Canada. It's over an advertisement from Ontario's government that's been playing on American networks. Ontario's premier recently launched the $75 million anti-tariff campaign using a video with the voice of former President Ronald Reagan. It's from his famous address in 1987. And in the video, Reagan is heard saying high tariffs lead to retaliation by foreign countries and trigger fierce trade wars. Trump wrote on Truth Social that the Ronald Reagan Foundation said it's fraudulently used. The foundation posted online that the ad misrepresents the president's radio address, and Ontario didn't have permission to use it. Trump also went on to write how important he says tariffs are to his country's economy and said, quote, based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated.
The fallout from this advertisement controversy extends far beyond a simple diplomatic dispute. Experts who have watched Trump's negotiating patterns over the years note that his private discussions with foreign leaders are often more hostile than his public statements, suggesting the situation behind closed doors may be even worse than what we're seeing publicly. What makes this particularly significant is the timing. The Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments in November about the legality of Trump's sweeping tariffs. Two lower courts have already determined that Trump cannot unilaterally impose wide-ranging tariffs under emergency powers law. Trump's administration argues otherwise, claiming he can regulate importation, including tariff policy. The Canadian ad was clearly designed to influence American public opinion ahead of this crucial legal battle. But while Trump was focused on the Reagan advertisement, Mark Carney was playing a much longer game. In an evening address to Canadians, the Prime Minister laid out a vision that represents nothing less than a fundamental reorientation. Canada's economic strategy represents nothing less than a fundamental reorientation.
All right, good morning. Look, for months we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. And it's in that context that our officials, my colleagues, have been working with their American colleagues on detailed, constructive negotiations, discussions on specific transactions, specific sectors, steel, aluminum.
Canadian officials have been remarkably candid about their position. While acknowledging they cannot control U.S. trade policy, which has fundamentally changed from previous decades, they've been engaged in detailed, constructive negotiations with American colleagues on specific sectors, including steel, aluminum, and energy. Progress has been made, and Canada stands ready to continue building on this progress when the Americans are ready. The U.S. has fundamentally changed its approach to trade, raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression, Carney said. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner. Carney's announcement to double Canada's non-U.S. exports over the next decade isn't just ambitious rhetoric. It represents a strategic pivot that could have profound implications for both countries. Currently, more than 75% of Canadian exports go to the United States. Carney's goal would dramatically reduce that dependence, spreading Canada's economic risk across multiple international markets. The Canadian Prime Minister was brutally honest about the challenges facing his country. The jobs of workers in our industries most affected by U.S. tariffs, autos, steel, lumber, are under threat. Our businesses are holding back investments, restrained by the pall of uncertainty that is hanging over all of us, he said. This uncertainty isn't just about current tariffs, but about the unpredictability of American trade policy under Trump. Carney specifically mentioned re-engaging with global giants India and China, signaling Canada's intention to deepen relationships with America's strategic competitors. This isn't just about trade diversification, it's about geopolitical realignment. If Canada successfully reduces its economic dependence on the United States, it gains significantly more foreign policy flexibility. The stakes couldn't be higher for both countries. Canada is America's largest foreign supplier of steel, aluminum, and uranium. About 60% of U.S. crude oil imports come from Canada, and 85% of U.S. electricity imports. Canada also has 34 critical minerals and metals that the Pentagon considers essential for national security. If Canada successfully diversifies its export markets, the United States could find itself competing for access to resources it has long taken for granted. For Canada, the challenge is enormous, but not impossible. The country has significant natural advantages that make export diversification feasible. Carney called Canada an energy superpower, noting that the country has the third largest oil reserves and fourth largest natural gas reserves in the world. These resources are in high demand globally, just in the United States. The timing of this trade breakdown is particularly problematic given the broader context. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, which Trump himself negotiated during his first term, is up for review in 2026. Rather than building toward that review with positive momentum, the relationship is now characterized by mutual distrust and economic warfare. This isn't the first time Trump has threatened to end trade talks with Canada. In June, he made similar threats over Canada's digital services tax on American technology companies. Canada quickly backed down then, rescinding the tax to support trade negotiations. But this time feels different. The Reagan advertisement controversy has given Trump a pretext to walk away from negotiations entirely, just as Carney is publicly declaring Canada's intention to reduce its economic dependence on the United States. The economic implications extend far beyond the two countries involved. Disruption of U.S.-Canada trade could ripple through global supply chains, particularly in the automotive sector where cross-border manufacturing has been deeply integrated for decades. American consumers could face higher prices for energy, lumber, and other Canadian commodities if trade tensions escalate further. What makes Carney's strategy particularly shrewd is its long-term focus. While Trump's trade policies are subject to the volatility of American politics, Carney is building relationships and infrastructure that could outlast any single administration. By the time Trump potentially leaves office, Canada could have significantly reduced its economic vulnerability to American trade policies. The Reagan advertisement controversy also highlights a deeper irony in American politics. Reagan, who Trump and his supporters often cite as a conservative hero, was actually a strong advocate for free trade. His warnings about the dangers of protectionism, featured in the Ontario ad, represent mainstream Republican economic thinking for decades before Trump's rise. The fact that Reagan's own words now sound like criticism of Trump's policies shows how dramatically the Republican Party has shifted on trade. Douglas Ford's decision to pause the ad campaign after Trump's outburst might seem like backing down, but it's actually tactical brilliance. Ford announced the pause would begin Monday, but not before the ads run during MLB's World Series games over the weekend, ensuring maximum American viewership for Reagan's anti-tariff message. Our intention was always to initiate a conversation about the kind of economy that Americans want to build and the impact of tariffs on workers and businesses, Ford said. The broader implications of this trade breakdown extend to America's relationships with other allies. If the United States is willing to terminate trade negotiations with Canada, its closest ally and most integrated economic partner, over a television advertisement, what does that signal to other countries? European allies, Asian partners, and Latin American neighbors are all watching how America treats Canada and drawing their own conclusions about the reliability of American commitments. For Canada, this crisis represents both challenge and opportunity. The challenge is obvious. Reducing economic dependence on a market that currently absorbs three-quarters of your exports is enormously difficult. The opportunity is equally significant. Success would give Canada unprecedented economic, sea sovereignty, and foreign policy flexibility. Carney's strategy isn't just about finding new export markets, it's about fundamentally restructuring Canada's economy to be more resilient to external shocks. We are charting an economic strategy to move Canada from reliance to resilience, from uncertainty to prosperity, he said. This includes significant investments in domestic industries, worker retraining programs, and infrastructure development. The automotive sector represents a particular challenge and opportunity. Canada's auto industry is deeply integrated with American manufacturers, but it's also increasingly attractive to companies looking to access both North American and global markets. If Canada can position itself as a more stable, predictable partner than the United States, it could attract investment from companies seeking to hedge against American trade volatility. Energy represents perhaps Canada's greatest leverage in this economic reorganization. While the United States currently dominates Canadian energy exports, global demand for reliable energy supplies has never been higher. Asian markets in particular are hungry for the kind of stable, long-term energy partnerships that Canada can provide. The timing couldn't be more challenging for the United States. As America seeks to reduce its dependence on Chinese manufacturing and strengthen its domestic supply chains, losing reliable access to Canadian resources and manufacturing capacity creates significant strategic vulnerabilities. The Pentagon's recognition of Canada's critical minerals and metals as essential for national security makes this trade breakdown particularly problematic from a defense perspective. What we're witnessing isn't just another trade dispute, it's the potential unraveling of one of the world's most successful economic partnerships, triggered by a collision between Trump's impulsive trade policies and Carney's strategic patience. The Reagan advertisement was just the spark. The underlying tensions have been building for years. The question now is whether this breakdown is temporary or permanent. Can the relationship be repaired, or has too much trust been lost? Carney's announcement about doubling non-U.S. exports suggests Canada is preparing for a future with reduced American economic dependence regardless of who occupies the White House. For American businesses and consumers, the implications are immediate and significant. Higher costs for energy, raw materials, and manufactured goods, disrupted supply chains, increased economic uncertainty. The integrated North American economy that has driven prosperity for both countries could be fracturing in real time. The irony is that both countries need each other more than ever. Climate change, global economic competition, and security challenges require unprecedented cooperation. Yet trade policies driven by political posturing are pulling them apart precisely when collaboration is most crucial. As this crisis unfolds, one thing is clear. Mark Carney has fundamentally changed the game. While Trump focuses on the immediate political benefits of trade confrontation, Carney is building the foundation for long-term Canadian economic independence. Whether that foundation becomes reality will determine not just the future of North American trade, but the balance of economic power across the entire continent. The Reagan advertisement may have ended the current round of trade talks, but it's also accelerated a transformation that could reshape North America's economic landscape for generations to come. In trying to punish Canada for using Reagan's words against tariffs, Trump may have inadvertently pushed his most important ally toward the very economic independence those words ultimately advocated.